All right, what's going on, guys? Evan Aldo here. Wanted to do more of a, motivational, more of a type self-improvement, kind of type video here. And, I've been thinking a little bit, on this channel, I think I'm going to upload this to Evan Aldo Motivation. I made a second channel. I was thinking about, maybe doing a second one for kind of the vlogs, the motivational stuff, maybe some motivational shorts, other things, maybe a little bit of fitness stuff too. Because I know a lot of you guys, I was trying to do the podcast on the main channel too. I know a lot of you guys, like, you're all about trading, you're all about crypto, which is awesome. And, I'm about a few other things as well. I'm just not, it's not all crypto, as much as, crypto is great, as much as, trading and investing and all of these, ways to make money are great. Sometimes it kind of comes down to what I've thought, and this is some of the things I've told people. I've met a lot of people. I remember when I was traveling, I met this guy around my age, really nice kid, and he was, I was telling him about kind of law of attraction a little bit. I was telling him about visualization. I was telling him about positive thinking, and it kind of went over his head. And he said to me, like, "Dude, you sound like somebody who's talking about leprechauns being real." And, I was thinking about that for a little bit because, he was kind of, when you grow up too, it depends, obviously depends where you grew up, where you're from, all those type of things. But, ultimately, imagine you live, you grew up in a real rich community, you're not looking at prices as much. You're not, you're not really worried about, when you go to a grocery store, you kind of just get what you need. You're not looking at every penny, you're buying and all that. You're not, all that type of stuff. But if, you grew up more middle class or lower middle class, let's say, you're more trying to get good deals. Some people, I remember my parents, they used to always look at coupons, what was on sale to a certain extent. They would, when they bought groceries, sometimes they would go to a different store to buy different things because it was cheaper at one store than the other. Which, I would say, your time is your most valuable asset. No matter what happens, you could lose all your money. There's no guarantee that you can't get it all back. But your time is kind of the one thing you really can't get back. I mean, maybe you could do things to extend your life. Maybe you could do things to live longer, be healthier and all that, but really you're not getting those hours back. You're not getting those minutes back. And that's kind of the most important thing here because, let's say in a lot of things too, this is important to realize because a lot of people, they get all, frustrated, all, annoyed if, let's say you lose a lot of money in something. Say you lose, maybe you're working a while, really hard, you saved up a few $100,000 or whatever, and then maybe you got divorced. Maybe you got sick, you had to have surgery or something. Maybe it wasn't covered by insurance. I don't know, something like that. Maybe you got sued. I don't know. Something happened. You lost your job. You end up losing your house or whatever. A lot of things could happen, and you lose that. A couple $100,000 that you were saving up or whatever. A lot of people are really frustrated about that. But the thing that's interesting here too, and Naval Ravikant said this. You would like to be in the position, a lot of very wealthy people are in the position, very successful people. Mr. Beast actually said this, I believe, pretty recently. If you took everything away from them, they would be back where they were within a year, in 6 months. I think Mr. Beast said he would be back. I don't know if he'd have as many subscribers as he does now, but even if nobody knew who he was, even if he just erased everything, he would be back and making a very good living in about 6 months. He would probably go viral. He knows how to do it. He knows how to create that good content, create that value. I mean, that's essentially all of business. I mean, it's all about generally just creating value. If you can provide value that people want, that people need, you'll be rewarded for it greatly. I mean, it's that simple. Now, obviously, with the internet, I think it's a bit easier. The internet is kind of a double-edged sword because one thing on the internet, I'll talk about the negative first. The one thing is like, there's just so much competition. Anybody in the world could try to outcompete you. Somebody across the world could try to do the same thing you're doing and charge less for it. You know what I mean? There's things like that. But at the same time, what the internet gives you is that kind of unlimited permissionless leverage where, say you live in a community where no one wants to buy whatever you're selling. Say you live in a place where no one likes you. Not that. Let's just say, nobody cares about what you're selling. Nobody has the same views as you. Nobody has the same interests as you. You can go on the internet and you can find millions of people theoretically that do have the same interests as you. It could be very different compared to where you live, compared to where you grew up. I remember, the city that I grew up in, for the most part, I went to public schools until high school. Like the interests, and then I went to a private high school for high school. The interests that the kids had in high school versus in public schools up until that were day and night a lot of times. It was just a very different interest. The views they had were extremely different. The things that they would have been interested in buying, interested in doing, were very different than the people in the other city. I'm not saying anything's better and worse, just different. So you kind of have that, that difference there. And there's people that say go where you're treated best. That's some Nomad Capitalist, a YouTube channel I really like. Andrew Henderson, he always talks about go where you're treated best, and talks about different places in the world where you could save on taxes, where there's, better health care for cheaper, things of that nature. You live a higher quality of life for cheaper potentially, depending on who you are. He talks about, a lot of that. And I think that's ultimately in the digital age too, with the technology. I think since kind of there were people doing that, beforehand. If you ever seen the movie The Beach with Leonardo DiCaprio, there were, I think that was 2001. That was pre-cell phones. There were people going to Thailand, going across the world, living there before that. But it got bigger with the invention of probably the iPhone 4, I would say. That's where, the GPS was really good, where you could kind of just go to a place and you didn't really, that's an extremely good invention, because, I'm not old enough to really know what it was like kind of before that in terms of driving, because I didn't get my license until when I was 16. It was already like 2013, I think. And we had the iPhone. You never got lost, but before then people would get lost, and you'd have to walk into gas stations, ask people for directions, all that. And it's a huge invention. I mean, that's the biggest thing that kind of happened. The internet too, which is we're still kind of adapting to it. And the thing that's interesting too is obviously when you're younger, you're more into the new stuff. I don't know exactly why this is. Maybe your brain's a little bit more malleable. Kind of the younger you are, the easier it is to kind of learn this new technology and kind of use it to your advantage. Because you look at a lot of people like who are older. I mean, most of them could text. They could do some stuff. They could kind of use it takes longer for them to catch on. They could kind of use the GPS on the iPhone now. They could do a lot of stuff, but I mean, are they recording stuff, like this with the, wireless microphones and all that, and have the setup like this? I mean, most people in general aren't. Even young people don't have, a setup like this. It's pretty cool, where I do my, trading, where I do the cryptos and all that, and it's fun. It really is. And I think, ultimately one of the big principles here is to kind of have gratitude for what you do have. And, there's a big notion, I think, in life where, like, let's be real, a lot of people are depressed. A lot of people are unhappy. A lot of people are very frustrated. And this is kind of how there's always that notion that, like, people are saying, like, oh, it's getting worse. Oh, it's, it wasn't like that. It's so much worse than it used to be. And now we have all these issues. Really, it wasn't that different. I mean, I think it was kind of the same even back when the Bible was written. I mean, a lot of stuff that these biblical texts that were written thousands of years ago say are still kind of true to this day. And then if you look at the book Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, he talks about how like 98% of people, basically he says they're, the analogy, they're controlled by the devil, which essentially means that they are, they're essentially, they're not living a life they truly want to live. They're not living a life they truly want to live. They're frustrated in all these things. And then, he talks about the ways that you could kind of avoid this. And, fear is one of the things that brings you back. I got to reread that book. It's really good. The audiobook is probably even better because it's like an interview type thing. But ultimately, stay clear too of vices, alcohol, drugs. He talks about this to kind of stay clear of that, which is an important part too, which I think, for the most part, sure, you do see, a lot of people are drinking, a lot of people who are doing, a lot of vices, partying and all that, and they do make money, they do become successful at it. But I think that people who are a bit more disciplined, do have a bit more success, kind of for the most part. And, when you're feeling kind of frustrated, when you're feeling, depression's interesting too, because there's a lot of different reasons. Like, the typical thing now is kind of like if you're depressed, most people, they'd see a therapist. The therapist, you take pills for it. And I mean, what is it? 1 out of 5 Americans are on antidepressants or anxiety, kind of things of that nature. But you gotta, I mean, if you're really bad, yes, those things obviously can help you. I think there's definitely a reason. There's definitely something to be said about that. But if you can kind of pinpoint the reason that you're depressed, I mean, people. Let's get into the view too. Like, can money buy happiness? I mean, if you're depressed because you're struggling to pay your rent, if you're depressed because you're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, or maybe even less than that. I mean, if you're depressed because, I don't know, let's say your parents are disappointed in you because you don't make enough. That's usually, like, think about it this way: the number one reason most people's parents are disappointed in them, it has to do with money. Usually, I mean, maybe, I guess, if you kind of are partying too much, maybe you have a drug problem, something like that. I mean, that's a reason that they would be disappointed in you. But usually that goes hand in hand with not having enough. Usually if you're like that, you don't have, you're not making enough money. So it's usually the kind of the number one thing too, that kind of causes it in certain ways. But it's not everything. It's definitely not everything. Like Tim Ferriss he talked about money. I remember hearing, this was a few years ago, but for some reason I remember this like very, very like I was there, like it happened yesterday. I was listening to one of his podcast episodes in my car while I was at an In-N-Out drive-through in Los Angeles, and he was saying, like, having more money will solve your money problems, and it will kind of make you more of kind of what you already are. And it kind of is, the thing too that's interesting too is it kind of is a dopamine rush too, in a sense, like having, especially, like, it makes you kind of more like alcohol. They say alcohol, drugs, they kind of make you more of what you are, especially alcohol makes you kind of more of what you already are. I don't know if I completely agree with that, but I think money kind of definitely is, because if you're very impulsive, if you're a person who isn't disciplined, and you blow your money and all that type of thing, that you're going to get the money and then you're probably just gonna blow it. And he said it will solve your money problems. So if you're depressed for a different reason other than money, then it can't help you that much. Also, if you already have a lot of money and you're depressed, there's probably making more isn't going to help you. Probably very unlikely that it would. Maybe if you have some major achievement, it would make you feel fulfilled. But ultimately, I think too, what'll happen to a lot of people talk about meditation, which kind of increases, let's say, your willpower, increases, let's say, your focus and all those type of things, which can in turn, and your creativity too, I think. Ray Dalio has talked about this, meditates 20 minutes twice a day, which is a lot harder to do than many would think, with all the stimulation, short form content, all the dopamine, all the things. And it's like everything else. There's good and bad that comes with it. The good part is everything's summarized. You can probably learn stuff quicker if you use it in the right way. The bad thing is, you're probably not. You're just flicking through. Everything's designed to keep you glued to that device. So there's pros and cons. That's one thing I've really learned. Like, there's pros and cons to almost everything. There's pros and cons to almost everything. When you kind of think about a lot of these things. So obviously, we look at life, and everybody's kind of goal is to be fulfilled. You want to be healthy, happy, and wealthy. And wealthy can kind of be exchanged in this context for the word free. Are you free if you don't have the money to live where you want to live? Are you free if you have to wake up at a certain time every day, and show up at a certain place? You're freer than some people, definitely, but there's a certain extent. You're not completely as free as you probably would like to be. That's the interesting thing too. And I remember, I had one, let's say one kind of 9 to 5 job in my life, and I remember a few other, kind of 9 to 5 jobs that you know how you like if you have an interview for those, that it's kind of interesting when you have an interview for those because, they ask you questions like, why do you want to work there? And then, it's funny because we're just you can't really. It's funny because like, let's see, why do you want to work there? Obviously, the reason is to make money. Obviously, that's the number one, kind of reason you want to make money. That's probably. I mean, obviously, people are going to say like, oh, it's because I really like to do this. I have a passion for this. That you should say I have a passion for this. I understand this job. I'm qualified for A, B, and C, and then they ask you these, kind of questions. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are you good at? Kind of what are you bad at? And I mean, at the end of the day, obviously, they want, a person that's going to help them. It's kind of a win-win to a certain extent. I mean, everything, it's kind of a pyramid scheme a little bit because obviously the better work you do, yeah, you're going to be rewarded for it. But really, you provide value to that company. Who's going to benefit the most? I mean, obviously the shareholders, the CEO. And I mean, multi-level market, pyramids are not, it's not necessarily bad. I'm just saying what it is kind of. Some are, it's like everything else. Some are more worse to a certain extent. Some are better, It's kind of like that. But I remember like some of these, kind of interviews I had, I had a few of them. And, I remember too, it was interesting, one of them, like, and you kind of think too, like some of these people, like a lot of people, that's what's interesting too. It's kind of like when you're in school a lot, like it depends obviously when you're in high school or college or middle school, like, it's interesting too, because like most of the students, they don't want to be there, let's say. And the teacher, a lot of times the teacher doesn't want to be there. It's kind of, nobody wants to be there at the end of the day. Nobody really wants to be there at all. I guess to a certain extent, some people do, but like overall, like I'd say if you took like 80% of the people, 80% of the teachers and all that, like they'd rather be doing different things in their lives most days. Maybe they'd like to do it, 2-3 days a week or something, but like less. And then, people would say, oh no, that's not how it works. You gotta do this to better society, all that. And yeah, I'm sure, I think you're right. I'm kind of just stating facts here. And it's kind of like that in the job interview because it's like, you don't really want to be there. The person interviewing you doesn't really want to interview you. They're unhappy. You're unhappy. At the end of the day, everybody's just kind of unhappy and living in this society and kind of helping, the people at the high end of the company who started it to kind of get, wealthier in that certain extent. But in that aspect, I should say. And it's just interesting to think about. I remember when I first graduated from college, I was really frustrated because I was like, geez, am I going to have to like just work these 9 to 5 jobs for forever and just sit in this room that I don't want to sit in, that I feel like there's just so much more to life. And I started to realize, I remember too, like when I lived in LA, I read like a lot of books on money. I was reading like all of Robert Kiyosaki's books, like Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think that's where a lot of people like start with because it's such a bestseller. I remember like I listened to that audiobook like on a drive from LA to Phoenix, or I think it was from Phoenix back to LA, and it was just so engaging. I remember one thing he said in the book. I mean, there's always the critics that'll say like he made most of his money from his book and all that, and I mean, if he did, good for him. I mean, it's a pretty good book. He probably deserves it. And I mean, he did make a lot of, obviously, money from real estate as well. Probably used a lot of the money he made from the book to invest in real estate. That's what a lot of people do too. And I think in a lot of businesses, they use the money they make through teaching or whatever to reinvest in their business, to reinvest in something that they teach about. And it's a lot of times, I don't think there's really necessarily anything bad about that. I think Grant Cardone's kind of a bigger kind of version of that too. And oh man, what was I going to say? I remember he said, it's hard to escape. He didn't use these exact words, but he basically said it's hard to escape the matrix, but it's not that hard. And I think that's the best thing I could kind of tell people because if I just told you it's really easy and all this, people are automatically going to disagree. They're going to say like it's not easy, all that, and I think they're right to a certain extent, but if you're automatically assuming it's going to be impossible, it's going to be really hard, it's going to be terrible, I mean, you're probably not going to be that motivated to try to do it. That's kind of the issue too that I always had in my life. Like when somebody would tell me like you got to work hard, it's going to be awful, it's going to be all of this. I remember too like when I was like playing football when I was like in 6th grade, I think forget who it was, some adult in my life, or I forget who it was. It's been a while, but somebody was like telling me like how hard it was going to be. You're going to have to wake up at this time. You're going to have to do all these things. It's going to be so hard. And they were basically telling me I was never going to be able to do it. And I was just thinking about that. Like they unmotivated me just so much. And I ended up actually quitting because of that kind of like, that was part of the reason I ended up not doing it really. And I think that if I didn't hear that, if I was more motivated by somebody who maybe told me, yeah, you have to work hard, but it's going to be very rewarding, there's going to be a lot of good aspects and it's going to be worth it, then I probably would have, followed through. It's kind of, how you view it. Obviously, if you think something is going to be awful, it's kind of the power of the placebo or the nocebo, the opposite of the placebo, the negative placebo, let's say. If you think something is going to be really, really bad, it probably will be. And if you think something is going to be really, really easy, really good, it won't be as bad. And that's kind of law of attraction. It's kind of visualization, because if you think something is going to be not so bad, it probably won't be a lot of times. And the thing too, like, I remember this is the main thing, like I was thinking about a lot, like when I was younger, I would think like, geez, like how hard is it going to be for me to escape the matrix? How hard it was going to be? And I think the thing I would say to people right now is like, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard. There's going to be, it's going to be a lot of work, but it's not going to be that hard. You know what I mean? It's not going to be that hard. There's going to be a lot of fulfilling parts. And if I know too, like Dr. Bruce Lipton, he was talking about somebody who like healed themselves. I mean, a lot of people would probably say this is nonsense, but I don't know. But I think there's something to be said about it. Some person healed themselves by just watching comedy all day. They were watching Laurel and Hardy and other things. And if you have never heard of Laurel and Hardy, it's pretty funny. It's one of those, I used to watch it when I was a kid because my parents and grandparents used to like it. It's an older, kind of from like the 1920s, 1930s, this like comedy duo. And it was pretty funny. Like they would, and I remember I was thinking about that and like the laughter, the positivity that put, somebody in a really good mood. And that's the thing too. Like I was, I remember like my grandparents, my parents too, like the stuff we used to watch, like when I was a kid, we used to watch those cartoons that were from such a long time ago, that were from a while ago. We used to watch this comedy. There's a lot of funny stuff we used to watch. My father really liked that stuff. And it was like, it brought positivity for some reason. I don't know, like it was like laughter. And then I don't really watch much media, movies, Netflix, TV now, but I was watching, a few episodes like the other week of Black Mirror, a few like recent movies. Like I was sick with a cold a few weeks ago, so I was just kind of chilling for one weekend at my apartment. And I was watching, I was like, geez, this stuff is so bizarre. This stuff is so weird. Like there's not much positivity in it. And that's the thing too, like with music too, like a lot of music isn't that some of it's positive, some of it's good, but it like puts you on a weird frequency a lot. You're kind of distracted. Even like media too, like everything's kind of negative in like some aspects. Everything's like kind of negative. So that's the thing, like we're going on 23 minutes right now. My battery's kind of getting low in this, got cut off there for a second because the battery died. I've had to plug it in for a second here. But anyway, guys, I think that's kind of the main things I wanted to kind of convey in this video. Look, some things are challenging, but they don't have to be that challenging. I think the last thought I was kind of having here a little bit was, that's, when you're trying to do something, like it should be something you're engaged with. It should be something that's fun to you. And I think one of the most important things too is to kind of stay relevant, to kind of stay, on top of your game. You really do have to adapt. You really do have to learn different things. And let's say, change your true direction, change the thing. It's kind of like Naval Ravikant used the analogy, it's kind of like climbing up a mountain. You climb up the mountain, you're like 3/4 of the way there, let's say. And then you realize when you're 3/4 of the way there, your path is like getting all bad and it's getting real dangerous and you can't really make it to the top, but you realize, oh, there's a different path you could have went up that's better, that has, once you get this high, better, and you can make it to the top, but you got to go down all the way back down and restart. That's what you may have to do a lot of times. It's always going to be that little challenge, that little kind of, increase, that little kind of jump up where you got to keep kind of trying, keep kind of going and adapt to, the different things, adapt to the different world, adapt to different needs, provide value in maybe a different way. And you may get, some heat for it. Some people may not, like it as much as they like the old you. And people don't like change sometimes. Some people don't like what's different, but you'll find new people new people to kind of latch on to your new idea, your new thing, the new thing that you're kind of into. So that could be the main thing. So when you're working towards something, it has to be, obviously a lot of people, on the internet, they look into, let's say, certain things that have been popular to make money. Obviously, drop shipping's popular, things like that, that's popular, but you may not have any, interest in that. Maybe even real estate, people like Grant Cardone, Robert Kiyosaki, you invest in real estate and rent it out or whatever. I'm sure that could work. I'm sure people could do very well in that, but you may not be that interested in it. Sure, maybe you can make money on it, but you wouldn't be that passionate about it. You got to find something that you're kind of more passionate about, something that you're more into, because, something that maybe, have let's say, that's not that hard to do. That's just that medium to do, let's say. Something that's medium to do, not that hard to do. That may be hard to you because you have no interest in it, and then something that's hard for most people would be easier for you because you have more interest in it. I think that's an important kind of thing to realize here. I think that's an important thing to realize. So I want to leave you guys with that right now. Hope this video, helped you. Hope this video kind of gave you some motivation, something to think about it. So yeah, like the video, subscribe to the channel, guys, and check out my social media down below. Share the video. Always appreciate that. Have a good one, guys. Bye.